Welcome back to the channel. A bit of a different one today. A little bit of family history and some World War II battles. Okay, a World War II battle. Just to get it out of the way, these are not mine. These are my great-grandfather's. I'll call him F.W. Jones. He was in the 31st, 51st AIF. It started out as a militia battalion, which is, he joined it in, it's on the top of the thing here, on the 16th of February 1943. In 44 it became an actual part of the AIF, so he was actually in the militia and then later transferred to the AIF. He was not conscripted. He had a young daughter and he worked on the railroad, so he joined the war in 1943. He was deployed to Bougainville. He got very, very sick during the war. He spent the next 8 years afterwards recovering from malaria. Under Australian law and RSL policy, RSL is a Returned Services League, family members, direct family members can wear medals. These are replicas, although these are official replicas. They're smaller, you have to get a lot of paperwork to have these done. And there is another one that has to be put on the ribbon that we only just found when we cleaned out my auntie's house after she passed away. So direct descendants can actually wear these on the right breast. Left is for people who actually won them or earned them, and right is for direct family members who are in commemoration. And I think for this video and possibly one or two others that it is fitting to wear these. So yes, I'm not trying to claim medals. I was never in the army. I was never in any type of military. I'm 23. I doubt I could have a 1945 star if I was 23. For purposes. There is the 39 to 45 star, the Pacific Star, the War Medal, the Australian Service Medal, and in his personal name badge, this is the official AIF, or the Australian War Medal, the AWM medal case. We have the certificates back there, is the Australian Service Medal 45 to 75 with the PNG class, because he actually deployed after the war, just briefly after the war in PNG to part of the rebuilding effort in New Guinea. So that's the medals out of the way. Why am I talking about the 31st, 51st? Well, he was in the 31st, 51st, and the 31st, 51st was actually involved in some fighting at Bougainville. I have another relative who I am doing more research into now, Uncle Len. He was in the 2nd 31st, completely separate regiment. 31st, 51st was an amalgamation of two militia battalions, and so they kept 31st, 51st. They actually had separate patches for the two, and depending on where you joined the unit, you wore that patch. So I believe he was in the North Queensland unit, so he would have had a blue and white patch, very similar to the 29th type patch. Not exactly, but similar. I couldn't actually find a proper. There's a lot of different versions of it, but I think it sort of looks like that. Though obviously not exactly. That's the 29th Assault, the D-Day type patch. Anyway. So a little bit more solemn video today, maybe a bit longer. The intro is probably dragging out a little bit. So today we're going to look at the Battle of Simba Ridge. Simba Ridge was in Bougainville. So what happened in Bougainville was the United States Marine Corps and part of the army, mostly Marines, had attacked Bougainville. The Australian and United States intelligence services estimated that there was about 10,000 Japanese in Bougainville when there was about 40,000. And so the Marines basically got a beachhead and then handed off to the Australians, and the Marines redeployed to the Pacific. So the Australians came in, and among them was the 31st, 51st, my great-grandfather's regiment, my father's mother's father, if anyone's interested. So the 31st, 51st is deployed, and they have some actions, and then they move north to Tsimba Ridge, which is here. So that's Simba Ridge. You can see it's sort of like it's a horseshoe-shaped thing, sort of like here's the ocean, and Simba Ridge is just sitting there. So for purposes, that's east, north, west, south. Okay, that's east. Okay, so the pimple is sort of on the eastern part here, and you have the rest of Simba Ridge like that. And what the AIF did, we're not exactly sure exactly where my great-grandfather was at this point. He did not like to talk about his military service, although apparently he would watch military movies whenever they were on TV and had pretty horrendous nightmares. So and he actually passed away before I was born. So yeah, there's many documents to go through from my auntie's house to sort of nail everything down, but that's obviously a pretty tender process. So, okay, so I've got a whole bunch of notes here. The way I've done this is I've gone on, which don't jump down my throat. I've gone on Wikipedia and basically used Wikipedia to lay out the thing, and basically then done research and verified everything, because Wikipedia has got quite a few things wrong. It exaggerates a lot of stuff. It makes things sound worse than it was. It makes things sound a lot better than it was. At one point they call it a crocodile-infested river. There's no evidence of that. Anyway, so if it looks exactly like I've copied from the Wikipedia article, it's because that is I've just gone through, taken a whole bunch of notes. That's the layout, because frankly, Wikipedia does actually lay things out quite well. So it's just the information that sucks. So yeah, that's why it might look a bit strange, but it is independently verified, and I have actually checked everything in here. So Simba Ridge is located here. You can see it's quite actually a small ridge. So on the 17th of January 1945, so we're seeing quite end of the war, the Australians, I've got to sit in the front, otherwise the white balance goes all messed up, sorry. On the 17th of January 1945, the Australians advanced towards the Genga River. And the Genga River, not crocodile infested. The Genga River is just an objective. They don't know the Japanese are fortified on Tsimba Ridge. Tsimba. Well, you can see that obviously in the thing, but yeah, not this kind of Simba. Not that. Okay. So the Australians aren't actually going for Simba Ridge. They're actually going for the Genga River, and because again they are woefully underestimating the amount of Japanese in Bougainville. Bougainville is named after the French explorer who went head-to-head with Captain Cook, who actually was the one who mapped the east coast of Australia. So sort of a little dichotomy there. Anyway, so they went up for Bougainville, and a big recurring theme in the Bougainville campaign is that there are not a lot of resources committed to Bougainville because it's seen as a secondary sort of thing. Again, woefully underestimating the number of Japanese who are actually there. A lot more stuff is sent over to Borneo and to Burma, where my other relative was engaged in combat over there. That needs way more research, because but anyway, so one's fighting here and the other one's fighting over there, and resources are going out of Bougainville, especially with the Americans leaving. Although they do give the New Zealanders some Corsairs, which we're going to see later. Or the Australians are flying training aircraft as airstrike vehicles. That's how desperate they are for stuff. Anyway, getting ahead of myself. So on the 17th of January, the 31st, 51st advance towards the Genga River, and they come across a series of huts. And they advance through the jungle, and they take the huts. It's fine. But as they try and leave the little village, group of huts, in a lot of the sources, these are called villages, but it's not really. It's more like these could be a single person or a single family type area. It could just be a farmer's area where you have basically the equivalent of a barn, a tool shed, and a family living area. So to call it a series of hooches, or in Vietnam they'd be called like a hooch, but to call a series of huts a village, I think is a little bit overestimated. So a series of huts. The Australians. It's a platoon-sized force, I believe from A Company or maybe D. Again, this part is a bit iffy, but so a platoon-sized force takes these huts, and as they try to progress further to the Genga River, they run into an entrenched Japanese position with, again, a platoon-sized force. So, for the wargamers out there, here is a platoon combat between an entrenched Japanese opponent against Australians in a village. The entrenchment was about 100 yards away, so about 90 meters from the village. So you have Australians in these huts fighting Japanese out there. The Japanese don't have a lot of machine guns. They do have light machine guns, but they don't have proper tripod stuff. They will later, but they don't now. That's something Wikipedia gets wrong. But yeah, okay. Anyway, so the Australians engage the Japanese, and not a lot happens. Not a lot of people are killed. I don't believe any Australians are killed. Let me just check my notes. Yeah, no. And essentially the Australians drive the Japanese away from these positions. The Japanese have this sort of, especially here in Australia, it's like this death or glory type thing, and really we don't see that in Bougainville very much. Not to the point we saw it in, there was an island led by, what was his name? He was the cavalry commander. Anyway, where essentially he banned bonsai charges. But we do see a bonsai charge here. I'm going to dispute that. But so they drive the Japanese off from this position, and they continue advancing towards the Genga River. They're about 600 meters away from the Genga River. Distances are really short here, so as we'll see. They advance towards the Genga River, and they come across another pile of huts. And they actually go into these huts, and they find the unit designation of the Japanese that they're against, which I'll put on the screen here. I believe it's the 81st. They come up against the... I haven't written it down, but yeah, I believe it's the 81st. But they don't find a number of men. It turns out it's the entire regiment. It's 900 or so men. Probably more like 1,000, because there is an artillery unit in support. And they know that there's... they should have known that there was a battalion there, because they actually captured the 2 battalion artillery pieces, the Type 92s. The Type 92s, which the Wikipedia article calls 75mm, the Type 92s, which were the actual battalion guns. So... which the Japanese had apparently just left undefended, or lightly defended. So the Australians now have the battalion artillery, and the Japanese are now relying on their attached artillery. There is a skirmish at this set of houses as well. This time the Japanese attack the Australians in the houses. Again, platoon actions here. I don't know, chain of command, bolt action. I would probably say chain of command because the casualties are much lighter. This would actually make a really good chain of command campaign. Anyway. So again, the Australians get attacked. 1 man is wounded. 1 Australian is wounded. Several Japanese are killed and wounded, and the Japanese are sort of driven off again. But this is not a decisive action. It's not like the Japanese were routed from the field. They simply just took casualties, and they couldn't drive the Australians off, so they retreated. And then when night fell, the Australians retreated from the huts as well, because it's not a strategic position. It has no military purpose to them. A bamboo and straw hut is not cover. Anyone tells you it's concealment, but it isn't cover. There is a difference. Concealment basically just blocks vision. Cover actually prevents bullets. Anyway, there you go. That's like a 6-week military course in like 10 seconds there. And so they withdraw from the huts, and then they prepare to move up into the Simba Ridge, where they're basically... The Australians plan to take the Simba Ridge and then advance down onto the Genga River. Before they really go for an advance, the Japanese bombard them with more artillery, but it's incredibly ineffective. It wounds it wounds a single man. A single man is wounded. He survives. Unfortunately, I do not have his name, but it's actually quite hard to track down members of the 31st, 51st for some reason. Maybe because it was switched from a militia into a regular army regiment. There was a lot of paperwork that got messed up. Anyway, the single man is wounded, and he later survives. A lot of the Japanese shells are duds. Remember, in 1945, the Japanese military is not so great. The military is fine. The Japanese production isn't so great. I mean, look at the German production in 1945 gets a lot of crap because it is garbage. But the Japanese shell production was just not up to scratch. At least here, the stuff at Bougainville, which again, it wasn't really seen as a major thing by both sides. So yeah. Anyway, the shells are pretty much duds. At least for this barrage. Later on, the Japanese actually get some good stuff up. So the Australians, the 31st, 51st, they move up towards Simba Ridge, and there is a proper village, as in not just a set of huts, but an actual substantial village, which has it's not a garrison, but there is a Japanese platoon in the area. And so an Australian platoon engages a Japanese platoon in a village. There's 3 war games already, guys. This is a 2-day period, 3 war games. One of them at night, or at the twilight. And they engage the Japanese, and this actually has some pretty heavy casualties. There are 14 Japanese dead, and 1 Australian killed, plus a number of wounded. So this is actually a substantial engagement. The Japanese do bring up machine guns here, and the Australians do withdraw as the darkness comes. So the Australians fight until darkness comes. And the Japanese, I think, technically claim a victory here because they did repel the Australians, but the Australians weren't trying to take the village, so it wasn't a victory. It was just the Australians bloodied the Japanese 14-1, so that was quite good, or quite effective, militarily effective. And this is the last sort of skirmish we're going to see between platoon-sized forces. After this, we start to see patrols and companies, so we really start to change it up a little bit. So let's have a look at the main advance on the Simba Ridge, and when the Australians find out that there is actually a fortification here. So the Simba Ridge, I showed it you before. It's like a horseshoe shape. The thing down here is a pimple. There is like a those familiar with Gettysburg, on the hook at Gettysburg, there's a little bit on the short end. I think it's called Saddle Ridge or something, where there's essentially two little hills with a tiny little gap, and that's basically what happens at Simba. So we have the curved piece here. Again, this is the east. This way is east. And, oh, that way. Yeah, no, sorry, it does go that way. Yes. So that's the east, and here is the pimple, which is sort of separated but not really. There's like a little saddleback ridge, and there's a little bit of water there. And the Australians basically focus most of their attention down here on the pimple and the amphitheater, which is what they call the big cleared area. There was about 150 meters of just cleared vegetation, which the Japanese had excellent machine gun sights along, and you know that you're in the Pacific when 150 meters is considered extreme long-range visibility. So, yeah, it's a lot of sources. I believe one book described it as unparalleled vision. I don't think that's true, but 150 meters is quite good. That's very good for an unprepared position in the jungles of Bougainville. That's definitely a good find for the Japanese. It's very smart of them to fortify this. I say they fortified it. Wikipedia would have you think that there were pillboxes and bunkers on Bougainville. That's misleading. That's why you shouldn't trust Wikipedia. Always verify stuff. And even some books will just use the word pillbox and bunker. There were bunkers. Here's a Marine. Here's one of the USMC clearing out a bunker on Bougainville. Notice the camouflage pattern uniform. Nice. The Marines had some cool stuff. Marines always have cool stuff. Well, not always. Sometimes they get a lot of junk, but in the Pacific they had cool stuff because they actually could run around in camouflage. Anyway, here's a Marine taking out a bunker which would probably be exactly the same as the ones on Bougainville. So we're talking about packed earth with log support. So when I say the word bunker, it's more like not a sanger, because a sanger is made out of rock or sandbag, but a sort of field fortification, not a concrete metal bunker. It's not Normandy. It's the Pacific. So the Australians capture a 75. They capture some 75 mil guns. These were probably the Type 38s, the older style guns like this, not the Type 90s. Probably older guns. Again, I'm using my intuition here, but I'm gonna say that they weren't having the best primo stuff at Bougainville, so these are more likely Type 38s. And after the Australians make contact, they send some patrols out, and they sort of, okay, there's guys on that ridge. It's a fortified position. So the Australians basically have three choices. They can assault the ridge, which they do. They can bypass the ridge and encircle it and let the follow-up. I can't remember what the follow-up was. There was a follow-up Australian regiment who eventually took over, but that's later. Basically bypass and let the follow deal with it, or they can attempt to flank to the north around the Ganga River and then come back down. And so they initially just try and attack the pimple itself. Machine gun fire drives them off. Then they attempt to scale the main ridge and sort of fire down on the pimple. That works, but eventually the Australians are sort of pushed back off that position as well. And the Japanese bring in reinforcements from pretty much all the garrisons surrounding the Sanga Ridge, the Simba Ridge. Sanga, I keep calling it Sanga because Sanga is a sandbag machine gun post. I got that on the brain. Anyway, they pull reinforcements into the Simba Ridge and bring it up to about 1,000 men up against 3 companies of 31st, 51st, about 800. But that's without sick and wounded, and there was a lot of sick. So you're probably looking about a Japanese force of 500 to 600 men and an Australian force of about 4 to 5. Again, when you take out sick and wounded, when you take out rear echelon type guys, that sort of thing. So the Australians have not really made a big assault on Simba Ridge. They've attacked the pimple. They've gone past the amphitheater, and they've essentially now got 2 options: bypass, which they're not going to do now because they know it's a focal point for Japanese resistance. And remember, they think there are maybe 10,000, so they basically think they've got 10% of the Japanese force in Bougainville concentrated on this one little area. So they're pin them down, shell the crap out of them, hit them with the airstrikes. We'll see what they are really later. and take him out. So it is a tempting target. We know now that was more likely 5 or less percent, probably 2 or 3% of the Japanese forces. Anyway, so the Australians come up with a rather good plan. They send C Company north to cross the Ganga River. Crocodile infested. It wasn't crocodile infested. No man was killed by a crocodile on the Ganga River. Also, these are North Queensland Australians. They know crocodiles. They live around them. They would have just shot them. I highly doubt crocodile-infested rivers pose any threat whatsoever to men with grenades, Lee Enfields, Owen guns, Bren guns, 2-inch mortars. Crocodiles don't pose any threat to them whatsoever. The Ganga River isn't that wide. They would have no issue getting across it. Crocodile-infested. Give it a break, Wikipedia. Anyway, so they cross the Ganga River, and the problem is they now have this giant supply line that goes down from the C Company in the north all the way back down to the Pimple and the main HQ for the 31st, 51st. And this is patrolled mostly by the men of A and B companies, as you do. Mostly B. Are patrolling this route constantly to keep it open. You don't need... The problem with this is the Japanese only need to get like 5 guys to sit somewhere along that route, and then when a truck drives up or when your men start hucking supplies up on their back, you start dragging supplies up, 5 guys with rifles can do damage to a supply wagon or a supply convoy. Not a wagon, but some sort of convoy. So you need to constantly patrol this route, and the Australians and the Japanese basically had running gunfights up and down the between the Ganga River and the Pimple, or the end of the Simba Ridge, Simba Pass, up and down, running gunfights, running battles, which again, platoon level skirmish games, guys, or even smaller. I've got a game called Combat Patrol. The full rules are not out yet because I haven't published them all. I really should get around to that, but on BCWar on tabletop.com you can look at Combat Patrol. It is my own. It's free. I'm not making any money off it. Squad level World War II warfare, which again we're going to see here. Platoon level, squad level, the company stuff is just about to kick off, so company level games. Again, it's commemoration of personally my family history, learning a little bit about Bougainville, but also it's translated over to wargaming. Everything I ever learn about and ever hear about, I think, I wonder how I'd do that on the tabletop, so I'm just throwing out some ideas. So the Australians in C Company, they're essentially flanking the Japanese in the north. Here's Simba Ridge, C Company, and the rest of the battalion is down here. And the battalion then calls up medium mortar support. So the next week, the 21st to the 28th, is mostly probing attacks. The Australians probe platoon level. Not only can you just do a platoon level game anywhere in the Pacific, you could do a platoon level game anywhere on the Simba Ridge over 7 days. So I'd probably do again chain of command, just because bolt action doesn't have a wound mechanic, whereas chain of command, especially in a campaign, if you could run the Simba Ridge campaign, and if I did have an Australian army, I really should get another one, or I really should paint the stuff I have, to do the Simba Ridge, because I think you could easily do a campaign of 50 plus games. Not that that's to the extreme, but these small platoon and half platoon probing attacks. So they spend the week probing the Simba Ridge, and they identify basically where the Japanese positions are. Then they bring in a special. If you've seen my video on the Sudan, it's all linked, guys. History is all linked. I can go on a tangent because history is so well linked. The 2nd Mountain Artillery Battery. The 2nd Mountain Battery was formed back in 78. It went over to the Sudan in 84, 85. I didn't really see action in the Sudan, but it went there. Australia's first overseas military conflict against the Mahdi, who was a radical Sufi Islamist who was actually dead soon after that. But his thing continued up until 98. At the Battle of Omdurman, where until 98, when Kitchener brought up the Maxim guns and dealt with the Mahdists finally. Winston Churchill was actually involved in that Omdurman. I might do a video on that later. But so the oldest Australian artillery battery is now supporting. I'm assuming they're using updated guns, but they're supporting this attack on Simba Ridge. The preparation for an attack. So there's a week of probing attacks, and then after the 28th, Trenches are starting to be dug forward. Observation posts are starting to do. Big troop movements, like company level movements, are starting to take place. And they have mortar batteries firing on the bridge. Vickers machine guns firing on the ridge. They don't call them any airstrikes, but they have a lot of artillery. Basically just to keep the Japanese heads down. And there's actually a report written where basically one of the Australian officers is saying, or it's alleged that he is saying, it's a report written after the war by someone who served with him. And it's going to fall. And he essentially says that the Vickers guns were being fired not to suppress the enemy, but to cover the sound of men digging and to cover the sound of men marching, which, I've heard a Vickers gun fire before at a show. They are loud. You can fire a Vickers gun all day, as long as you have water, which you have heaps of in the Pacific. So, yeah, I can understand that there would maybe be 2 Vickers guns, and you'd fire those just alternately where you reload them. And that would cover the sound of a platoon digging forwards, or a couple of squads. Sections. Sorry, we're Australian. Sections. So yeah, you just essentially keep the Japanese troops' heads down. Stop them hearing what's going on. Stop them seeing what's going on. Artillery coming down. That sort of thing. So Simba Ridge is under heavy artillery fire. The route from C Company down to the rest of the battalion is still being attacked, still being patrolled. No serious attack is actually made on them until a little bit later. So on the 24th, so in the middle of the week, is when C Company really gets himself set up over the Genga River. So they move up there under the cover of this, but they had forward elements there already, and then they bring the rest of the company up there. And as soon as the company gets set up, as soon as they're in position, the Japanese essentially attack them. Some people say the entire battalion attacks. I don't believe that at all. The battalion couldn't have been coordinated, so probably 2 companies, 1.5 company at least, 1.5 companies. Probably an effective strength of about a company. So a company versus company action here. Wonder what game could do company actions. Essentially, they attack C Company, and what they do is here's the Genga River here. The Japanese basically just frontally attack them. Not with bonsai charges. They don't bonsai charge. They attack them the same way a conventional army would attack another conventional army. Bonsai charging was done, but it was not the main tactic go-to thing for a Japanese army. That's a big myth. So the Japanese attack, and they can't defeat them because they have this very good Genga River. And so what they do is they push east. They push east and try and cut them off from the rest of their support. They try and cut them off across the ocean, isolate them, and then they'll move in for the kill. But as they're moving to the east, the Australian commander of C Company correctly deciphers what they're doing, and he actually gets on the radio and calls in the artillery, and he directs them himself. So we have a company commander directing the artillery, and he personally leads counterattacks with platoons of C Company, and they drive the lead elements of the Japanese force back towards the Simba Ridge. It's not so much a taking of ground; it's a very like Vietnam style. Jungle is neutral. Well, the jungle is neutral as a World War II concept anyway. I believe that was the British came up with that sort of term. But it's very much a we're not garrisoning areas. No one's taking ground. It's literally just deny the enemy this area, push them back, and then we're going to return back where we were. We're not fighting over anything. We're fighting for ground almost in a World War I style sense. But yeah, obviously not as permanent. I'm trying to struggle for words here, but you know what I mean. They're not fighting for a village. They're not fighting for a stream. They're just, okay, they're trying to flank us, throw them back, go back to where we were. And this gets repeated over the next few days. Company level attacks. Companies fight the company. Flanking force goes around. Company commander leads a force to attack the flanking force. Calls in artillery. Throws them back. And eventually the Japanese stop attacking C Company. They never stop harassing them. But after a few days, the main attacks stop. After the C Company has basically got the Japanese bottled up, they are blocking their retreat to some extent. C Company does not cut the enemy off. The enemy can still retreat, but C Company essentially means that they're going to have to abandon all their heavy weapons, which they may or may not do, depending on who wins this battle. They do. Australians win. So the Australians call in their air support. Okay, now I have the quotation marks because air support is actually basically a couple of Corsairs from the New Zealand Air Force and Wirraways. This is a Wirraway. It's based on an American training aircraft. It's an Australian training aircraft, the first ever aircraft made in Australia. which they celebrate for some reason. It's a training aircraft that has machine guns, and they strapped bombs to it at some point, I believe. The WWII means like challenger or champion in a Aboriginal language here in Australia. Quite a lot of Australian streets and aircraft and stuff are named after Aboriginal tribal language groups, because there's like 160 odd language groups here in Australia, so a lot of the streets and stuff are actually named after Indigenous language groups. So the WWII is basically a machine gun aircraft. The Corsairs are not too bad. The Corsairs are quite good. They're piloted by New Zealanders. I'm not sure where they were launched. I believe they're carrier-based aircraft, so I'm not exactly sure where they came from. But yeah, so they perform airstrikes, and they do quite well. They keep the enemy's head down at least. The artillery come on, the mortars come on, and the Australians then get ready for an attack. Oh, the WWII had a single confirmed kill in all of World War II. A single confirmed aircraft kill. That's how great it was. It took down one Japanese Zero, and that's it. So yeah, the WWII is not a fantastic aircraft.